The council chamber floated in the darkness of space, a massive ring of metal and glass that orbited the planet Centauri Prime. Inside, representatives from 848 different species sat in their designated seats. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some saw in colors humans couldn't imagine. But they all agreed on one thing: humans were useful. Ambassador Hana Yun stood at the speaker's platform, her small human frame dwarfed by the towering Vrelian who had just finished his proposal. Her hands gripped the edges of the podium, knuckles white with tension. She had been trying to speak for the past 20 minutes, but the chamber's attention had already moved on. The Human Optimization Act was now law. The vote had taken less than 5 minutes. 847 voices in favor. 1 against. Hana's objection was recorded in the official logs, filed away where no one would ever read it. The act was simple in its cruelty. Every human child born in council space would be genetically tested at birth. Their DNA would determine their entire life. Strong bones, construction, and mining. Quick reflexes, maintenance work in zero gravity. High intelligence, systems engineering. No choices, no dreams, just assignments. Hana walked out of the chamber with her head high, though her heart was breaking. She had spent 15 years as Earth's ambassador. 15 years of being ignored, interrupted, and dismissed. She had believed that patience and diplomacy would eventually earn humanity respect. She had been wrong. Her personal communicator buzzed. A message from Earth, encrypted on the quantum channel that only humans could access. She opened it in the privacy of her quarters. One word appeared on the screen: enough. Across the galaxy, 40 million humans received the same message at the exact same moment. Captain Day Kwan was inspecting Hyperspace Gate 7 when the message arrived. He was 63 years old and had spent 40 of those years maintaining the gates that allowed faster-than-light travel. His hands were scarred from radiation burns, and his back ached from decades of work in uncomfortable positions. He had trained over 200 alien engineers in gate maintenance. Not one of them had ever thanked him. He looked at the message for a long moment. Then he looked at the gate, its massive rings spinning in perfect harmony. Exotic matter contained in fields that he had personally calibrated last week. Without his adjustments, this gate would fail within a month. The council engineers who were supposed to maintain it didn't actually understand how it worked. They just knew that when something broke, they called a human to fix it. Day touched his communicator. All human personnel. This is Captain Kwan. Pack your tools. We're going home. Across the station, 68 human engineers stopped what they were doing. They didn't argue. They didn't ask questions. They had all known this day might come. Chief Engineer Tae Bei was deep inside the station's reactor core when he got the message. He was fixing a coolant leak that the station's Vrelian chief engineer had said was impossible to repair. Tae had fixed 17 impossible problems this month alone. He carefully sealed the leak, making sure it would hold for at least another week. He wouldn't leave the station's inhabitants to die, even if they had never treated him with respect. Then he gathered his tools and headed for the docking bay. The human ships began leaving within hours. Small, personal craft, large transport vessels, and everything in between. They filed flight plans for human-controlled space and departed without fanfare. No speeches, no dramatic announcements. They simply stopped showing up to work. On the frontier colony of Helax 4, Dr. Hyo Mira finished her shift at the hospital. She had just saved the life of a Tarlaxian child with a genetic condition that Tarlaxian doctors didn't know how to treat. The child's parents hadn't even looked at her when they took their daughter home. Hyo had stopped expecting gratitude years ago. She left a data file with all her research, carefully organized so that even the laziest doctor could follow her procedures. Then she boarded the last human transport off the colony. Yuna Sung was piloting a cargo ship through the dangerous Kelvar Nebula when the message came. She had been running supplies to a mining colony that no other species would service. The route was too dangerous, the pay too low. But the miners needed food and medicine, so Yuna made the run every month. She delivered her cargo, refused the bonus the grateful miners offered, and set course for human space. She wouldn't be coming back. On thousands of stations, colonies, and ships across the galaxy, the pattern repeated. Humans finished their work, left clear instructions, and departed. They didn't sabotage anything. They didn't steal. They didn't even complain. They just left. The Galactic Council noticed, of course, but they weren't worried. The Vrelian ambassador actually laughed when someone mentioned the human exodus during a session 3 days later. A temper tantrum, he said, his translator turning his words into something humans could understand. They'll be back when they run out of money. Humans need us more than we need them, the other council members agreed. Humans were skilled laborers, yes, but surely they weren't irreplaceable. The council had survived for 10,000 years before humanity joined. They would be fine. Ambassador Hana Yun was the last human to leave council space. She stood in her empty office, looking at the awards and certificates that covered one wall. Diplomat of the Year, Outstanding Service to Galactic Unity, Friend of the Council. All meaningless pieces of plastic. She left them on the wall and walked out. Her ship joined the steady stream of human vessels flowing toward the border of council space. Behind them, the great machine of galactic civilization continued to turn, unaware that the thousands of tiny gears that kept it running had just been removed. In 4 weeks, the first hyperspace gate would fail. In 6 weeks, colony life support systems would begin to break down. In 8 weeks, the Council's military fleet would find itself stranded. But for now, the humans simply flew home in silence, leaving the galaxy to discover what happened when you took good people for granted for too long. The message had been clear. Enough. And humanity had meant it. The first gate died on a Tuesday. Hyperspace Gate 43 served the Tarlaxian commercial routes, one of the busiest shipping lanes in Council space. Every day, thousands of ships passed through its shimmering portal, traveling distances that would take years in mere seconds. The gate had been operating for 70 years without a single major failure. It failed at 1437 station time. The exotic matter containment field fluctuated first, just a small wobble that the automated systems should have corrected. But the correction protocols had been written by humans, based on instinct and experience as much as mathematics. The Tarlaxian engineers watching the monitors didn't understand what the numbers meant. They had always just called a human when the numbers looked wrong. There were no humans to call. The wobble became a surge. The containment field collapsed. The exotic matter that allowed faster-than-light travel couldn't exist in normal space. It imploded in a flash of radiation that could be seen from 3 light-years away. 40,000 ships found themselves stranded in normal space, hundreds of light-years from their destinations. It would take them decades to reach port, using conventional engines. Some didn't have enough life support to last that long. Counselor Vex Thran was in a budget meeting when the news arrived. He was a practical creature, a reptilian species known for their logical minds. He had been one of the few council members who questioned the Human Optimization Act. Not because he cared about human feelings, but because he recognized competence when he saw it. He excused himself from the meeting and went to the Gate Operations Center. The room was chaos. Engineers from 6 different species were shouting at each other, pulling up schematics and data files. None of them knew how to fix the problem. Vex pulled up the maintenance logs. Every significant repair or adjustment for the past 20 years had been performed by human engineers. The non-human engineers had signed off on the work, collecting their salaries, but they hadn't actually done anything. He found a training video from 15 years ago. A human woman, named Nari Jin, was explaining gate maintenance to a class of alien engineers. Her voice was patient as she described the quantum field harmonics, the ways that exotic matter could destabilize, the feeling you got in your bones when something was about to go wrong. Feeling, instinct, experience. The alien engineers in the video had written down formulas and procedures, but they had missed the point entirely. Gate maintenance wasn't just mathematics. It was an art. Narration had left Council space 3 weeks ago. So had every other human who knew that art. Vex started making calls. What he learned terrified him. Gate 43 wasn't unique. Every gate in Council space was showing signs of stress. The humans had been performing constant micro-adjustments, tiny corrections that kept the systems running smoothly. Without those adjustments, the gates were slowly falling apart. The Council had 62 hyperspace gates. At the current rate of degradation, they would all fail within 6 months. On the frontier colony of Marquesh 9, the life support systems started making a strange noise. It was a high-pitched whine that seemed to come from the atmospheric processors, the massive machines that turned the planet's toxic air into something people could breathe. The colony's chief engineer was a Vrelian named Krath. He had been in charge of life support for 8 years. In that time, he had never actually repaired anything himself. His human assistant, whose name he could never remember, had handled all the actual work. Krath pulled up the schematics for the atmospheric processors. They had been designed by Vrelian engineers 60 years ago and were supposed to be completely automated and maintenance-free. But the schematics showed dozens of modifications, unauthorized changes that weren't in the original design. He found a note in the files, written by a human named Bote. Original design has fatal flaw in pressure regulation. Will fail catastrophically in high humidity conditions. Have installed manual override and pressure shunts. Requires daily calibration. There was a detailed procedure for the daily calibration. Krath tried to follow it. The instructions seemed simple enough, but when he actually attempted the work, nothing went right. The pressure readings didn't match what the procedure said they should be. The manual override controls were labeled in human shorthand that he couldn't decipher. He called in every engineer on the colony. None of them could figure it out either. The whine grew louder. 3 days later, Atmospheric Processor 2 shut down completely. The colony had 4 processors. They needed at least 3, running to support the population of 12,000. Krath sent an emergency request to the Council for help. The Council was receiving 200 similar requests every day. In the military sector, Admiral Korvan prepared his fleet for a routine patrol. The Council maintained a force of 500 capital ships, the most advanced warships in the galaxy. Their jump drives allowed them to appear anywhere in Council space within hours, a vital capability for maintaining order across thousands of light years. Korvan initiated the jump sequence. The drives hummed to life, exotic matter fields building up around each ship. This was a routine operation. Performed thousands of times, the fleet jumped. They emerged from hyperspace 3 light-years off course. Korvan ordered an immediate diagnostic. The jump drives were functioning perfectly according to their specifications. But the calculations were wrong. The drives were supposed to be self-calibrating, adjusting automatically for stellar drift and gravitational anomalies. He found a human signature in the navigation database, Lieutenant Hana Bay. She had been performing manual calibrations before every major fleet movement for the past 12 years. Small adjustments, tiny corrections that accounted for variables the automated systems couldn't predict. The Admiral pulled up her service record. She had filed reports about the navigation system's flaws. 17 reports over 12 years, each one explaining that the automated calibration wasn't accurate enough for safe military operations. Each report had been marked as noted and filed away. Lieutenant Hana Bay had compensated for the flawed system by doing the calculations herself before every jump. Now, she was gone. And the fleet couldn't navigate accurately. Korvan tried to recall the fleet to base. It took them 6 days to limp home on conventional drives, a journey that should have taken 6 hours. Councillor Vex Thran compiled all the reports and presented them to the full council. The chamber was quieter than usual. Representatives were starting to realize the scope of the problem. Vex showed them the numbers. 62 gates failing. 400 colonies reporting critical system failures. The military fleet effectively grounded. Trade down 40% and dropping fast. We need to negotiate with the humans, Vex said. Immediately, the Vrelian ambassador stood. Negotiate? They are in violation of their contracts. We should demand their return and impose penalties for this illegal work stoppage." Vex stared at him. "With what leverage? They've left. They're not coming back, unless we give them a reason to. They need our markets, our resources, our protection." The Vrelian insisted. Vex pulled up a star map. He highlighted a region of space beyond the Council's borders, an area that had been marked as unexplored and empty. Our long-range scans detected unusual activity in this region. Jump drive signatures, hyperspace gates, infrastructure. The Council chamber went silent. "The humans have been building their own civilization out there for decades," Vex continued. "While they worked for us, they were preparing to leave us. They don't need our markets. They don't need our protection. They don't need us at all." The Vrelian ambassador sat down heavily. Vex sent a message to the human border stations, requesting negotiations. The message was received and acknowledged. The humans didn't respond. 8 weeks after the humans left, the Council faced the worst crisis in its 10,000-year history. Hyperspace Gate 71 failed on a Monday, taking Gate 72 with it in a cascade failure that the Council's engineers still didn't understand. 38 gates remained operational, but all of them showed critical instability. Every day brought new warnings, new red alerts that no one knew how to fix. The economic damage was catastrophic. Galactic trade had collapsed by 82%. Entire sectors that depended on quick transport of goods were now cut off from their markets. Food rotted in cargo holds. Medical supplies expired before they could reach hospitals. Businesses went bankrupt by the thousands. Supreme Councilor Wrath called an emergency session. He was an old being, leader of a species that had helped found the Council millennia ago. He had served as Supreme Councilor for 40 years and had never faced a crisis he couldn't manage through political maneuvering and careful negotiation. This was different. "Give me options," he demanded, his translator rendering his words in a dozen languages simultaneously. Councilor Vex Thran stood to speak. He had barely slept in weeks, coordinating emergency responses across Council space. "We have 12 frontier colonies, facing total life support failure. 4 million people will die if we can't evacuate them. But we can't evacuate them because our hyperspace gates are failing, and our ships can't navigate reliably." "Use conventional drives," someone suggested. "It would take decades," Vex replied flatly. "They'll be dead long before the ships arrive." The chamber filled with agitated whispers. Death on this scale was unthinkable. The Council existed to prevent such disasters, not cause them. A Vrelian representative stood. "What about the technical manuals the humans left? Surely we can follow their procedures." Vex had tried that already. He pulled up one of the manuals on the main display. It was a guide to atmospheric processor maintenance, written by a human named Dr. Hyo Mira. The document was clear and well organized, with detailed diagrams and step-by-step instructions. "We've tried following these," Vex said, "but they don't work." The humans wrote what they did, but they couldn't write what they knew. There are intuitive leaps, practical judgments, experience-based decisions that can't be conveyed through text. He showed them a section about pressure calibration. The manual said to adjust the flow rate until it feels right. What did that mean? What did right feel like? The humans knew. No one else did. Another section described a strange noise that indicated imminent failure. High-pitched whine, approximately 4,000 hertzes, with harmonic resonance. The colony engineers had heard the noise, but didn't know it was a warning. Until Processor 2 had already shut down, the humans would have fixed it immediately because they recognized the sound from experience. Knowledge couldn't replace experience. And the Council had just lost 2 centuries of accumulated experience in a single day. What do the humans want? Wrath asked. What will it take to bring them back? Vex pulled up the Council's message logs. They had sent 47 requests for negotiation to human space. The humans acknowledged receiving each message, but never responded with anything substantive. They're ignoring us, Vex said quietly. The silence that followed was broken by a junior archivist, a young being who had been reviewing historical records at Vex's request. She approached the speaker's platform nervously. "I found something," she said, her voice shaking. Wrath's expression darkened. "Suppressed records?" The archivist displayed a file on the main screen. It was titled, Human Grievances. Formal Complaints, 2,647 to 2,847. Over 200 years, humans filed 47,000 formal complaints, the archivist explained. Safety violations, ethical concerns, requests for equal treatment, warnings about system flaws. Every single complaint was marked as frivolous and suppressed without investigation. She opened one complaint at random. It was from Captain Day Quan, dated 20 years ago. He had warned that Hyperspace Gate 43's exotic matter containment was vulnerable to cascade failure and needed a design overhaul. His warning was dismissed as alarmist and technically unsound. Gate 43 had been the first to fail. The archivist opened another complaint. Dr. Hyo Mira had reported that the atmospheric processors on 17 colonies had a critical design flaw that would cause failures within 20 years. She had included detailed technical analysis and proposed solutions. Her report was marked as outside her area of expertise and ignored. Those 17 colonies were now facing life support collapse. Complaint after complaint appeared on the screen. Warnings about navigation system flaws. Reports of discriminatory treatment. Requests for fair representation. Safety concerns. Ethical violations. All dismissed. All ignored. All suppressed. "They tried to tell us," Vex said, his voice hollow. "For 200 years, they tried to warn us. We didn't listen." Supreme Counselor Roth stared at the screen, watching decades of ignored wisdom scroll past. He had personally dismissed hundreds of these complaints during his tenure. He had thought he was maintaining order, preventing troublemaking. He had been condemning the council to disaster. Wrath composed himself. "Send them an official apology. Repeal the Human Optimization Act. Offer full council membership with complete voting rights and legal equality. Reparations for past injustices. Whatever they want." The message was crafted carefully, reviewed by the council's best diplomats, and sent on all channels. It included a personal message from Wrath himself, admitting the council's failures and begging for help. The human response arrived 3 days later. It came from someone named Admiral Quan Ho. The message was brief. "We received your apology and your offer. Thank you for the acknowledgement of past wrongs. However, we decline your invitation to rejoin the council." That was all. No negotiation, no demands, just a polite refusal. Wrath sent another message, this time offering extraordinary concessions. Humans would have veto power over council decisions. Earth would become a council capital world. Humans would receive preference in all trade agreements. Admiral Quan Ho's response was even shorter. Panic spread through the council chamber. They had offered everything they could think of, and the humans simply weren't interested. Counselor Vex Thran understood why. He pulled up a tactical scan of human space, showing what their long-range probes had discovered. The humans hadn't just left council space. They had built an alternative, 50 human worlds, all connected by their own hyperspace gate network. Independent colonies with functioning infrastructure. Trade routes with other species who had also left the council. A complete, self-sufficient civilization. "They don't need us anymore," Vex said. "We spent 2 centuries teaching them that they couldn't trust us, that we would never treat them as equals. Now they've built their own future, and they don't want us in it." The Vrelian ambassador stood, his bearing less arrogant than before. His homeworld was facing riots. The population had learned that Vrelian officials had been embezzling the budget meant for infrastructure maintenance, paying humans under the table to do the work, while pretending Vrelian engineers were handling it. "What about the dying colonies?" he asked quietly. Will they let 4 million people die to make a point? As if in answer, a new message arrived from human space. This one came from Ambassador Ray Jin. We will not allow innocents to die for the Council's failures. We will send emergency engineering teams to stabilize critical systems on a humanitarian basis. But we have terms. Finally, negotiation. Wrath seized on it. Name them. Anything. The terms appeared on screen. They were simple and non-negotiable. Human engineers would work as independent contractors, not council employees. They would be paid market rates, not the discounted wages the council had forced on them before. They would have full legal protections and the right to refuse unsafe work. They could leave at any time, and humanity would never rejoin the council. Wrath read the terms twice. They weren't asking to come back. They were offering to help as outsiders, as equals. The council had no choice. Wrath accepted the terms. The human ships arrived at Marquesh 9 colony with no ceremony or fanfare. 3 small vessels carrying a total of 15 engineers. They docked at the main station and immediately went to work on the failing atmospheric processors. Chief Engineer Krath watched them with a mixture of relief and shame. He recognized one of them, a woman named Sumi. She had been his assistant for 6 years. He had never bothered to learn her full name. Sumi examined Atmospheric Processor 2, the one that had completely shut down. She ran her hands over the machinery, listening to the sounds it made, feeling for vibrations. After 10 minutes, she had diagnosed the problem. The pressure regulator is misaligned, she said, not looking at Krath. Probably happened when someone tried to fix it without understanding the system. That someone had been Krath. He said nothing. Sumi and her team worked for 18 hours straight. They didn't just fix Processor 2. They reinforced all 4 processors, installed better monitoring systems, and trained the colony's engineers on basic maintenance. Real training. Not the superficial briefings that Krath had slept through years ago. When they finished, Sumi presented Krath with a bill. The cost was 10 times what the council used to pay for such work. Krath didn't argue. The colony paid immediately. Will you stay? Krath asked as Sumi prepared to leave. The colony could use permanent human engineers. No, Sumi said simply. We have our own colonies to build. Our own people to take care of. We'll come when you call us, and we'll fix your problems, but we're not coming back to live under council authority. She left without saying goodbye. Across council space, similar scenes played out hundreds of times. Human engineering teams appeared, fixed critical problems, trained local workers, collected their fees, and departed. They were professional, efficient, and distant. They no longer tried to make friends with the people they helped. They just did the work and left. The council learned what it actually cost to hire competent engineers at fair rates. The budget strain was enormous, but there was no alternative. The humans had the knowledge, and they could name their price. Admiral Quan Ho commanded the Human Defense Fleet from New Terra, the capital world of the Free Human Federation. His father, Captain Day Quan, had retired there after the Exodus. The old man spent his days teaching young engineers, passing on the knowledge he had accumulated over 40 years. Day watched the news reports from council space with grim satisfaction. He felt no joy in their suffering, but he felt no guilt either. The council had been warned. They had chosen not to listen. His son visited him on a quiet afternoon, bringing news from the border stations. 3 more council species have declared independence, Ho said. They're following our example, demanding better treatment, or leaving to form their own alliances. Day nodded. The council built itself on exploitation. Once we proved that you could leave and survive, others were bound to follow. The Tarlaxian hierarchy wants to ally with us, Ho continued. They're offering mutual defense treaties, trade agreements, technology sharing. What did you tell them? I said we'd consider it. Counselor Vex Thran sent a personal message as well. He wants to discuss a formal alliance between his species and the Federation. Day remembered Vex. He had been the only council member to vote against the Human Optimization Act. That loyalty meant something. Vex is trustworthy, Day said. If his people are serious about reform, we should work with them. The Free Human Federation was growing rapidly. 50 human worlds, allied with 12 other species who had left the council. They called themselves the Coalition of Independent Systems. Their combined economic power was already matching the weakened council. But the Federation wasn't interested in conquest or domination. They built their alliance on mutual respect and fair trade. Species joined because they wanted to, not because they were forced. Ambassador Ray Jin negotiated the Federation's treaties with a firm but fair approach. She had learned from Hana Yun's experience. Patience and diplomacy were valuable, but only when dealing with people who argued in good faith. The Council had never been that. Now Ray negotiated from a position of strength. When the Council tried to demand exclusive contracts or special rates, she simply refused. Other species were willing to pay fair prices for human expertise. The Council could accept the terms or find someone else. They always accepted the terms. There was no one else. The Vrelian dominance collapsed 6 months after the human exodus. It started with riots on the homeworld, when citizens learned how badly they had been deceived by their leaders. The government tried to crack down, but their security forces couldn't maintain order without the surveillance systems that humans had maintained. Within weeks, the dominance fractured into a dozen warring factions. Neighboring species refused to intervene. They remembered centuries of Vrelian arrogance and saw no reason to help. The former Vrelian ambassador sent a personal plea to the Human Federation, begging for assistance. He offered complete surrender, anything the humans wanted, if they would just help restore order. Admiral Quan Ho brought the message to his father. "What do you think? Should we help them?" Day considered it carefully. Millions of ordinary Vrelians were suffering because of their leaders' failures. But the humans had limited resources, and many species needed help. Send humanitarian aid, Day decided. Food, medicine, basic supplies. But no military intervention, no political involvement. If the Vrelians want to rebuild, they need to do it themselves. It was more mercy than the Vrelians had ever shown humanity. The aid ships arrived within weeks, marked clearly with Federation symbols. They delivered supplies to refugee camps and hospitals, asking nothing in return. Some Vrelians spat at the human aid workers. Others wept with gratitude. The humans remained professional either way. They weren't there for thanks or apologies. They were there because letting people starve wasn't who they were. Chief Engineer Tay Bay had become one of the richest humans in the galaxy. His independent engineering firm, Bay Solutions, employed over 10,000 people from 30 different species. They took contracts across the galaxy, solving problems that no one else could fix. Tay had a simple rule. He didn't hire Vrelians, not out of spite, but because most Vrelian engineers had learned to take credit for other people's work, rather than doing the work themselves. There were probably good Vrelian engineers somewhere, but Tay didn't have time to find them. He did hire Tarlaxians, though. They were quick learners and genuinely appreciated good teaching. He hired Vex's species, too. They were logical and thorough, good at following complex procedures. Bay Solutions became known for quality work and fair treatment. Employees could refuse assignments. They were paid well. They had real benefits, including medical care and retirement plans. It was radical in a galaxy where labor exploitation had been normal for millennia. Other human firms followed Tay's example. They built a reputation for competence and integrity. When someone needed a problem solved correctly, they hired humans. When someone wanted cheap, corner-cutting work, they looked elsewhere. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson. Quality costs money, and quality matters. Ambassador Hana Yun came out of retirement to help negotiate the Federation's first mutual defense treaty with Counselor Vex Thran's species. She met him in a neutral station, their first face-to-face meeting since the Exodus. I owe you an apology, Vex said immediately. I voted against the act, but I didn't fight hard enough to stop it. I didn't speak loudly enough. I was complicit through my silence. Hana appreciated the honesty. You were the only one who voted no. That took courage. Not enough courage, Vex replied. I should have done more. They negotiated a treaty that was fair to both sides. Mutual defense, technology sharing, and open trade. Neither side dominated the other. It was a partnership of equals. When the treaty was signed, Hana felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The galaxy was changing. Slowly, painfully, but changing. 2 years after the Exodus, Captain Day Kwan stood in a park on New Terra, watching his grandchildren play. They were growing up free, able to choose their own futures. They would never know what it felt like to be valued only for their labor. Admiral Kwan Ho joined him. We just got word that 5 more council species are requesting Federation membership. We're going to need a bigger diplomatic corps. Day smiled. Growing pains are better than the alternative. In orbit above, human ships flew alongside vessels from allied species. The hyperspace gates glowed steady and bright, maintained by engineers who were respected and fairly compensated. The Federation wasn't perfect, but it was built on a foundation of dignity. Humanity hadn't conquered anyone. They had simply stopped accepting less than they deserved. And the galaxy was better for it. 5 years after the Exodus, the galaxy looked completely different. The Galactic Council still existed, but its power had diminished dramatically. What had once been an empire of 848 species was now a loose confederation of less than 400. The rest had either joined the coalition of independent systems or formed their own smaller alliances. The Council had learned hard lessons about respect and fair treatment. But the lessons had come too late. Their reputation was permanently damaged. No one trusted an organization that had ignored 47,000 warnings and then acted surprised when disaster struck. Supreme Counselor Roth had resigned in disgrace. His replacement was a younger leader from a species that had barely participated in council politics before. She spent most of her time trying to rebuild trust and reform the council's worst practices. It was slow work. The hyperspace gates in council space were stable now, maintained by human contractors who charged premium rates. The council paid without complaint. They had learned what happened when you tried to get critical infrastructure on the cheap. Captain Day Kwan was 70 years old now. He walked with a cane, and his hands shook from old radiation exposure, but his mind was still sharp. He taught 3 classes a week at the New Terra Engineering Academy, passing on knowledge to the next generation. His students came from a dozen different species. Humans, yes, but also Tarlaxians, Vex's people, and others who had left the council seeking better opportunities. Day treated them all the same, with high expectations and genuine respect. One of his students, a young Tarlaxian named Kess, stayed after class one day. Professor Day, I have a question. Why do you teach us? After everything the galaxy did to humanity, why share your knowledge? Day sat down carefully, his old bones protesting. Because knowledge hoarded is knowledge wasted. We don't keep secrets to maintain power over others. We share what we know, because that's how civilization advances. But the Council used your knowledge against you, Kess pointed out. They did. Day agreed. But that was their failure, not ours. We don't become like them just because they wronged us. We build something better instead. Kess thought about that, then nodded. Thank you, Professor. After the student left, Day sat alone in the classroom for a while. He thought about all the years he had spent maintaining council infrastructure, all the times he had been dismissed or ignored. Those years had hurt, but they hadn't been wasted. They had taught humanity what kind of civilization they didn't want to build. Ambassador Ray Jin had become the Federation's most effective diplomat. She had a reputation for being tough, but scrupulously fair. When she negotiated, both sides knew they would get exactly what they earned, nothing more and nothing less. She was currently working on a trade agreement with a council species that wanted access to Federation markets. The species representative kept trying to negotiate special privileges, better terms than other species received. "We've been loyal council members for thousands of years," the representative argued. "Surely that counts for something." Ray looked at him calmly. "It counts for exactly as much as you make it count in this negotiation. Your history doesn't give you special privileges. Make me a fair offer, and we'll have a deal. Try to cheat, and you can trade elsewhere." The representative sputtered. "The council would never." "The council doesn't run the Federation," Ray interrupted. "We do things differently here. Fair terms for everyone, or no terms at all." Eventually, the representative accepted standard terms. He left the meeting frustrated, but with a signed treaty. 6 months later, his species would quietly begin the process of leaving the council to join the Federation. The Coalition of Independent Systems had 62 member species now. They had formed a loose democratic government, with rotating leadership and strict term limits. No one species dominated. Decisions were made by consensus when possible, by majority vote when necessary. It was messy and sometimes slow, but it was fair. Member species stayed because they wanted to, not because they were forced to. That made all the difference. Admiral Quan Ho commanded a fleet of 300 ships, representing 20 different species. They patrolled the coalition's borders, protecting member worlds from pirates and external threats. It was the most integrated military force in galactic history. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching a mixed crew of humans and aliens work together seamlessly. His communications officer was Tarlaxian. His weapons officer was one of Vex's people. His chief engineer was human, but her entire team was mixed species. They respected each other. They trusted each other. They had built something the Council had never achieved. Real unity based on shared values, rather than enforced compliance. "Admiral, we're receiving a distress call," his communications officer reported. "It's from a Council colony on the border. They're under attack by raiders." Ho considered it. The colony wasn't in Coalition space. They had no obligation to help. But people were dying. "Set course to intercept," he ordered. "Maximum speed." His crew moved without hesitation. They didn't ask if it was their problem. They just saw people who needed help and moved to provide it. The Coalition fleet arrived to find the colony's defenses failing. The raiders were well-armed and ruthless. Ho's ships engaged immediately, driving the raiders off with minimal casualties. The colony's governor contacted them afterward, stammering thanks. We didn't expect the Coalition to help. We're Council territory. People are people," Ho replied simply. "We don't let raiders attack civilians, regardless of politics." The governor was silent for a moment. "I'm going to recommend that our world apply for Coalition membership," Ho smiled. "We'd be happy to consider your application." Oh. Chief Engineer Tae Bei had retired from active fieldwork, but his company continued to thrive. Bei Solutions now employed over 50,000 people and operated in every major sector of the galaxy. They had become the gold standard for engineering excellence. Tae spent his retirement mentoring young entrepreneurs, helping them start their own businesses. He had a particular interest in helping people from species that the Council had historically exploited. He knew what it felt like to have your potential dismissed because of where you came from. One of his protégés, a young woman named Gina, had just opened her own firm specializing in medical equipment maintenance. She came to Tae for advice on her first major contract. "The client wants me to cut corners," Gina explained. "They say the safety margins are too conservative, that we can save money by reducing them." Tae shook his head. "Never compromise on safety. Not for money, not for convenience, not for anything. The moment you start cutting corners is the moment you stop being trustworthy." "But I might lose the contract," Gina protested. "Then lose it," Tae said firmly. "There will be other contracts. Your reputation is worth more than any single deal." Gina took his advice. She lost that contract but won 3 others from clients who valued her commitment to safety. Her business grew steadily, built on a foundation of integrity. Counselor Vex Thran had become an unofficial ambassador between the Council and the Coalition. His species had formally joined the Coalition, but he maintained relationships with his former Council colleagues. He worked to prevent conflict and promote understanding. He met regularly with Ambassador Hana Yun, who had come out of retirement permanently to help guide the Coalition's growth. They had become friends over the years, bonding over their shared experiences of trying to reform broken systems. "The Council is changing," Vex told her over tea one afternoon. "Slowly, but changing. The new leadership is implementing labor protections, grievance procedures, anti-discrimination policies." "Good," Hana said, "but it's too late for reconciliation." The Council had 2 centuries to implement those policies when it mattered. "I know," Vex replied quietly. "I'm not asking you to rejoin. I just wanted you to know that your exodus didn't just free humanity. It changed the entire galaxy. Species everywhere are demanding better treatment because you proved it was possible to leave and survive." Hana sipped her tea thoughtfully. "We didn't set out to start a revolution. We just wanted to be treated with dignity. Sometimes the smallest demands create the biggest changes," Vex observed. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. 2 old diplomats who had seen the galaxy transform. 10 years after the Exodus, Captain Day Quan passed away peacefully in his sleep. He was 75 years old and had lived to see humanity flourish beyond anything he had imagined when he first received that one-word message: enough. His funeral was attended by thousands of people from dozens of species. Former students, fellow engineers, military officers, diplomats, and ordinary people whose lives he had touched. They came to honor a man who had spent his life building things and teaching others to do the same. Admiral Quan Ho stood at his father's grave, holding his own children's hands. The kids were too young to really understand who their grandfather had been, but they would learn. His legacy was everywhere in the civilization humanity had built. Ambassador Ray Jin spoke at the funeral. Captain Day Quan never commanded armies or ruled governments. He fixed machines and taught students, but he helped build something more powerful than any empire: a civilization based on respect and dignity. We are all his students. We all carry his lessons forward. The galaxy continued to evolve. The Council slowly reformed, trying to win back the trust they had squandered. Some species stayed, hoping to fix the system from within. Others left to join the Coalition or form their own alliances. Humanity thrived in the Coalition, not as conquerors or rulers, but as equal partners with species who shared their values. They built, they taught, they explored, and they created. And they never forgot the lesson they had learned during those dark years under Council authority. Respect cannot be demanded or bought. It can only be earned through consistent, fair treatment. The Exodus had been painful. The transition had cost lives and caused suffering, but from that pain grew something better. A galaxy where competence was valued, labor was respected, and dignity was non-negotiable. Captain Day Quan would have been proud.